Hello, this is David. Today we're going to talk about the supply side of the market. All right, this is the second video. The previous video was the demand side, so today is going to be the supply side. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you recall, if you watch the demand video, we have our basic supply and demand graph. We have our price on the y-axis, and we have our quantity on the x-axis. And of course, last time we talked about demand, and demand is always an inverse between price and quantity. And today we're going to talk about supply. And supply has a positive relationship with price and quantity. So for example, we have producers, when they want to create a product or a service, the greater the price of that product, the more they want to produce. If you could sell a computer for a very high price, then they're going to want to produce as many as they can. Of course, the downside is that you have demand. If demand is low, then people don't want to buy those computers, and so supply would decrease because producers can't sell as many as they want. So, and of course, we also have what we call the equilibrium point. This is where demand and supply meet. And so let me just write this down, equilibrium. And so that's where the demand meets the supply. So let's go ahead and go into the next few questions and get a little more in depth in supply. Question 1 says, each graph refers to the supply for digital music players. Which of the graphs best describes the impact of an increase in the price of an input? Okay, so you have a digital music player and an input, a part, a microchip, what have you. Something becomes more expensive. And we don't know why it's become more expensive. Maybe it's from a tariff. Maybe it's a higher quality. We're not sure, but it's become more expensive for this input. So what would happen? Would the supply curve increase? Meaning, would the supply curve go that way, or would it go the opposite way? Well, if the input becomes more expensive, the overall product is likely to increase in price. And if it increases in price, you're probably not going to be selling as many. So what that would suggest is that if there's an increase in the input, the supply of digital music players will decrease. So in fact, the graph on the right is the correct one, and the graph on the left is incorrect. So supply will decrease because now it's become more expensive to create digital music players, and because it's become more expensive, the demand for those music players is likely to decrease, and so therefore you're going to be selling less, and so you're going to make less. Don't worry if you don't fully understand. We'll go to the next graph, and maybe the next example will be more clear. All right, question 2. We have the same graphs, price and quantity. We have supply 1, supply 2. Each graph refers to the supply for digital music players, so same product. Which of the graphs best describes the impact of an increase in productivity? Okay, so now we have an impact of an increase in productivity. Means we can make more products either faster, cheaper. We are more productive. And it could be maybe we have better skilled labor or we have better technology. There could be any number of reasons, but we're able to produce more at a cheaper rate. All right, so what would that suggest? Would the supply increase or would it decrease? Well, in this case, if we can produce more at a cheaper rate, if we can improve our productivity, we're likely to produce more. So the supply curve is going to shift to the right, and it's going to increase in quantity. All right. So the graph on the left is correct. The graph on the right is incorrect. The graph on the right would say that we decrease quantity because, for example, let's say you become less productive. You have labor that is not as skilled, or you fall behind in technology or whatever. Then if you become less productive, your supply would decrease. Okay, so let's go to the next example. Okay, now for question 3, it says we have the same product, we have the same graphs. Each graph refers to the supply for digital music players. Which of these graphs best describe the impact of an increase in the price of a substitute in production? So here we have a situation where we have a substitute. And if you are not familiar with a substitute is any identical product. So, if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy a bottle of aspirin, you can certainly buy not aspirin, but pain reliever. You can buy Tylenol, which is a brand name, or you can buy the generic store brand, which is a substitute. So in this case, we have a digital music players. And we're talking about the entire supply, but there's obviously very many brands. Some brands are more expensive, some are very cheap. So in this case, we have the increase of a price of a substitute in production. Production would imply the future. So what would happen to the supply of digital music players? Well, in this case, the supply is going to increase. So it's going to go from S1 to S2, and so therefore it's going to go to the right because we're going to have an increase in quantity because producers certainly want to get a higher price if they can. And so if there's an increase in price of a substitute in production, then we're going to try to take advantage of that and also increase our quantity that we supply. So graph A would be correct, and then of course graph B would be a decrease in the supply, which is not correct. All right, well, thank you for your listening. Be sure to subscribe, and there will be more videos on supply and demand and many other topics in the future. Thank you.